Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the Thanksgiving edition, the end of the regular season edition of the Detroit News College Football Show, and because it's such a special week, the angel of the big house has graced us with her appearance today. Angelique Chengelis, longtime beat writer for the Detroit News covering Michigan football. I'm Wojnwoski, columnist for the Detroit News. We didn't let Johnny Neo come. We didn't let anybody else come to talk about Michigan-Ohio State, because I've covered a few Michigan-Ohio State games. Angelique, this is the 60th one. Am I correct on that?
As usual, you're confused. You've covered more than 60. I've only covered a few.
Yeah, you have covered a few. Now, don't forget, Angelique has her little podcast, View from the Podcast. You can find that wherever, View from the Press Box Podcast, wherever you find them, okay? Now, it is. Oh, wait, you have some special guests this week on the podcast. Why don't you tell the listening audience about your special guests?
Well, I do, Wojo. Thank you. I have Dan Deerdorf, who was a member of the 1969 Michigan football team, Bo Schembechler's first season that upset that great Ohio State team 50 years ago. And he's also obviously radio analyst on Michigan football. And also our colleague, Bill Rabinowitz, from the Columbus Dispatch. We did a shared podcast discussing the upcoming game.
Oh, so you're going to get a little bit of insight from the other side. That's interesting.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that is right. It is the Buckeyes number one in the college football rankings. People talking about one of the all-time best Ohio State teams, maybe going back to 1969. They lead the nation in offense. They're right up there in scoring defense and all sorts of categories. And I'm sure you've heard these stats, Angelique, and help me out here. Because I remember when Michigan used to dominate the rivalry. It's been a little while. Lately, since we put you in charge of things, Michigan has lost 7 straight to Ohio State, 14 of the last 15, and Ohio State comes here having clinched the Big Ten East and an 8.5-point favorite. I know people make the comparison to 69 that set the Bo Schembechler program underway, the big, gigantic upset. What could possibly be the implications of this game? We know what it means for Ohio State. They'll go to the probably go to the playoff for sure. What could it mean for Michigan, do you think, and Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is Jim Harbaugh's 5th year, and a lot of people had high expectations for him probably in his 2nd year, right, Wojo? I mean, people have been waiting for this, and they've got their 3 rivalry games at home this year, and that seemed like a favorable schedule, and why a lot of people thought this team, even with a new offensive coordinator, Josh Gaddis, would be the team to beat in the Big Ten East. And surprise, not really. Here comes Ryan Day in his first year with Ohio State. So they've already knocked off 2 of their rivals, Notre Dame, Michigan State. This would be the trifecta. This is the one that means everything to Michigan fans and Ohio State fans, obviously. But for Michigan, I think in 69, you talk to those guys on that team, and they believe that established the modern era of Michigan football. Well, I'm not sure a win on Saturday would do that for the program, but I think it would reestablish what Michigan is. And they've had some close games recently with Ohio State. I mean, going back to the Brady Hoke era, obviously 2016, 2017, you could argue that was a great game plan by Michigan, just didn't have the right personnel operating it. So I think it just would put Michigan back into this rivalry. I mean, a lot of people want to say it's not a rivalry anymore, Wojo, but I think we both agree it is. But this would really put a stamp on where Michigan is going forward.
Well, you know what's funny? When people try to say it's not a rivalry anymore, and from wins and losses standpoint, it's a lopsided rivalry, certainly, but Ohio's, you heard Urban Meyer, the previous coach, say his 7-0 record against Michigan is his greatest accomplishment, more than national championships. And they still cross out the little M's and everything. So it certainly hasn't dampened their hunger and thirst for this series. Has it raised, in your mind, behind the scenes, Michigan's hunger to finally end this streak?
Oh, I think so. And I think the players aren't going to be as bold. I think Ohio State players, even at the Big Ten media days in July, they talked very openly that, yes, they think about Michigan all the time. And Urban Meyer, certainly that was the focus all the time. And Michigan players under Harbaugh in particular have been sort of like, well, yeah, I mean, it's important. But I think this year you've seen a little bit more of we do talk about them all the time. And this is something that's our focus. They just don't talk about it openly with us and in the media, and that's fine. But I do think that there's a sense this year, and maybe it's some of these younger guys. I mean, you've got a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. He's a sophomore. His father was an All-American in the early 90s, and he grew up here. He understands this rivalry. He wants to reestablish it. And you're getting some of these younger guys who are a little more fiery, and he's been the most bold, I think, this week in saying that, everybody's beatable. Ohio State is, in his mind. So I do think that there's been they've definitely been talking about this game for a while.
Well, you mentioned Aiden Hutchinson, who's been very good pass rushing specialist and everything else at defensive end. His father, Chris Hutchinson, great player at Michigan. I remember covering him. I think you covered Chris Hutchinson's father, didn't you? I don't know if he played at Michigan or not, but let's go back that far. But before you pipe in again, let's hear from Aiden Hutchinson. Right after Michigan beat Indiana 39-14, he did have some interesting words to say about the Buckeyes.
We're always going to do our job and play the game we play. Obviously this game is the biggest of our schedule, and we're just going to come out there and do our thing. We don't see them as unbeatable. Every team can be beat, and we're going to go out there and just do our job.
Well, if college football proves anything, it is that no one is unbeatable. I mean, just when you think Alabama's unbeatable or so-and-so's unbeatable, they get beat. In this rivalry, Ohio State's been close to unbeatable for Michigan. I want to ask you this philosophical question, Angelique. Do you feel like you're in the right frame of mind to get a little philosophical on me?
Sure. Let's try this.
Are you into the eggnog yet or anything like that, just to be sure? Oh, boy. All right, here it is. I've heard people say, because obviously Michigan's goal, and they were by many the favorite to win the Big Ten, certainly win the Big Ten East, that no matter what happens Saturday, the season is a failure. They did not accomplish, for the fifth straight year under Harbaugh, that goal of winning the Big Ten or getting to Indianapolis. I personally contend, playing a semantical game, if you beat Ohio State this season is a success. I've heard people say, even if they beat Ohio State, the season is a failure. Do you want to play the little semantical game with me, or which side do you stand on that?
I think if they beat Ohio State, it's a success. I mean, that's 10 wins. It's beating your rival and snapping a 7-game losing streak and 14 of the last 15. So, I think this is significant. I think a win on Saturday would mean everything. And it doesn't mean they're going to win. They're going to start a streak, but it gives them a different level of confidence that they haven't had. And I remember back in the Cooper era when the Michigan players were saying that they had a mental block, that the Ohio State players had a mental block when it came to Michigan. And these were some great Ohio State teams that Michigan beat those years. And, maybe there's a little bit of that block, too, for Michigan. And I think a win would go a long way. And I think that's a successful season in my mind. No, he didn't win a championship. They're not playing for the national playoff to get into the playoff. But this is considering that loss at Wisconsin to start the Big Ten and where they came from that second half of Penn State, I think that would be a very, very significant advantage for Michigan to win going into the postseason.
Yeah, see, I concur. And successful, is it a complete season? Well, no, it's not complete. But would it be successful beating Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Ohio State? It would. But that's my thought. But let's see if they can actually pull it off. And it will be interesting because Ryan Day but he was the play caller last year for Urban Meyer. But you just don't know when somebody takes over as head coach. He's got that team humming along. Michigan is also playing their best football of the year, and I contend Michigan's playing as well as they played going into the Ohio State game as they ever have under Harbaugh. Remember last year, Indiana picked them apart with the crossing patterns, and
Right.
there's some problems there, and Ohio State could exploit them. And then it was 62-39 the next week. Do you buy that Michigan playing their best football of the season, that they really do legitimately have a shot as 9-point underdogs? Or, okay, they're playing their best, but Ohio State's otherworldly. Which way do you fall on that one?
Well, I mean, I know you'd like to think that was an original thought by you, Wojo, but I've talked to a lot of former Michigan players,
What?
guys who are around this program a lot.
My thought.
And they all, I mean, to a man, they've said this is the best prepared they've seen a Michigan team going into the Ohio into
That's
the
what
Ohio
I
State
said.
game. And I know, that's what I'm saying. This is not original. And I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a couple things. Look at Don Brown. I mean, look how he has evolved since that game last year. He is, a lot of people want to say, well, he's a one-trick pony. He was stubborn. He's made changes. They've used more zone. He has adjusted. And they've given up touchdowns early to Michigan State and Indiana the last couple weeks. He's made adjustments. And I think he learned something from that game. And, I do think this is a better equipped Michigan team. I don't think the talent's equal to Ohio State, but I think there is a lot of talent. You look at these receivers, they are very impressive, especially some of these younger guys that we don't talk about enough probably.
Right.
And Shea Patterson, I mean, look how good this offense has been without turnovers. And maybe this is the offense that we would have seen to start with. And going into this season, Wojo, the one thing I pointed to, when we have to do our preseason predictions, I thought, the big story for me then, this is in probably August, was this is going to be Ryan Day's first time as a head coach in this game, and this is Josh Gaddis's first time in this game as a play caller. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how those two fare. I don't think it's going to be too daunting for either one of them, but it's something to consider when we're not talking about Chase Young and what he can do to an offense.
Yeah, Chase Young might be a bit of a handful. 16 and a half sacks for the Buckeyes? Obviously.
And missing 2 games, right? He missed 2 games.
Yeah, right, exactly. So real quick, let's wrap it up. I'll give my key. You can give your key. Don't copy my key because I'm going first, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
Yeah. See, my key is great as Ohio State's defense has been. I think Michigan will be able to throw it up a couple times. Nico Collins score couple of touchdowns. It is the Don Brown defense against Justin Fields. Justin Fields has only thrown 1 interception all year, hasn't been under much pressure. They've got to get pressure on him, and it's also the first really challenge they've had. Their toughest road games for Ohio State before this one were, at Indiana and at Nebraska? That's amazing that they haven't had anything like that.
Rutgers was tough. Rutgers scored a lot of points.
Always goes without saying. And then last week at home, they struggled a bit against Penn State before pulling it out. So I say it's going to be Don Brown, not blitzing necessarily, although he will. Just being totally unpredictable. Remember last year, I think it was Dwayne Haskins and the Buckeyes said, we knew it was coming. When we saw that man-to-man defense in the secondary, we couldn't wait to get out there. We had a grand old time. As long as Michigan does a better job of scheming, they should do a better job of hanging in there and not giving up 62 points. That's my thought. What's yours?
No, and I totally agree with you. And I think they've got to get a hand on Justin Fields and rattle him a little bit and do that early. But since I don't want to, copy you because you said I can't, I will say it's about neutralizing Chase Young. I mean, they've got to come up with different ways to do this. I spoke with, Dan Deerdorf on my podcast, and we talked about that matchup. And he said Chase Young is probably going to be too much for just the tackles to take on in Mayfield and Runyon. So they've got to come up with a different way. And one guy I threw out to him, and he laughed that he had considered this also, is maybe you use Ben Mason in there a little bit and just put a big body, a strong guy on someone like him. And but I think if Shea Patterson's going to have time to throw, that's going to be absolutely key. But the only way he has time to throw is if they can neutralize Chase Young. So, yes, you're right about the defense. I would have said that if I had the opportunity to go first. But I
But no, the
didn't.
Chase Young thing makes perfect sense. Or throw a bunch of tight ends out there in front of him, or whatever. I totally get that. All right, gonna have to do it. I haven't even made in my mind my prediction yet, but on the fly, we got to pick this game. Michigan, Ohio State. Ohio State favored by 8.5 or 9 in Ann Arbor Saturday. What say you, Angel of the Big House?
Well, Joe, I can't pick Michigan to win this game until I actually see them win a game in this rivalry. So I do think weather will be a factor when you look at the forecast. I mean, I could be very wrong about this because look what they did against Notre Dame in rainy conditions in that first half. But I think this is a different animal, and I still pick Ohio State, and I've got it 27-17.
27-17, so you got Ohio State covering as well. All right.
Yes.
I'm going to have to agree with you part way on this. I hate to do that, but I do agree until they get whatever this block. And it's not just a mental block. It's also Ohio State's really talented. But last year, Michigan got out-schemed. I don't think they'll get out-schemed that badly. I think they can hang with them, certainly. Have a chance to pull the upset right on the precipice. Michigan 20, Ohio State 23. Ohio State 23, Michigan 20. It should be a classic in the Big House. Be sure to wear your galoshes and your heavy coat. It's supposed to be sloppy, as you said.
Yes, I think it'll be a classic, just like you are, Wojo.
Does that mean I'm old? Is that what you mean by classic?
Maybe.
Spoken like a true classic. That's the Angel of the Big House, Angelique Chengelis. Stay tuned, stay with us forever, actually, for more Michigan football and college football coverage. All right, it's time to take a look at the Spartans, the other game in the state, Michigan State against Maryland in East Lansing. The Spartans, after beating Rutgers last week 27-0, need a victory to get to 6-6 and be bowl eligible. Joining us, our Michigan State insider, former Michigan State running back Nick Hill, a member of the 2013 Big Ten championship team. I'm legally required to say that every single time. And Nick, 6-6, I know that's not the greatest, loftiest goal. Michigan State has accomplished much more in other seasons. Where do you put this game Saturday in as far as the importance of getting bowl eligible? I know it can be overstated, understated. Where do you put this game in that regard?
This is the most important game of the year. It's more important than Ohio State, Michigan, or any other games because, like you said, it's being bowl eligible. And I've been there before. 2012, we had to go into Minnesota, beat Minnesota at Minnesota to be bowl eligible to go on to a bowl game, and we did. And, asked these guys a couple of years ago, being at a bowl game is a different feeling, is a different thing rather than being at home watching everyone else play. So, they have a decision to make. We either go out, play, and win. On senior day, too, by the way. These
Correct.
seniors' last home game here in Spartans Stadium. So there's a lot on the line. Winning at home, sending the seniors out right. The last senior game in Spartan Stadium, becoming bowl eligible, going home and not playing at all, or you still have more weeks of practice and be able to win a bowl game, have one of those. So it's a huge game this weekend.
Now, there is a projection that if Michigan State wins, that they will go to the Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit, and there's some projections that maybe they will play Florida State in the, that would be a boon for the Detroit Bowl and also an interesting matchup. Do you care where they go if they win on Saturday?
Not at all. A bowl game's still a bowl game. 2012, we went to the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl down in Tempe, Arizona on December 26th, and we won that game. I mean, again, TCU at that time was still a great program the year before then, the year after that. So I look at it, a bowl game is still a bowl game. To people, it's humiliating because it's not a New Year's Day bowl game or a BCS bowl, but ultimately it's still going and playing in the postseason. So to me, it doesn't matter.
Okay, before we move on with this, wanted to play this funny little exchange our Michigan State beat writer Matt Charbonnet had with linebacker Antoine Simmons. This was after the 27-0 victory over Rutgers, where Simmons basically said it had been so long since they'd won that he was wondering if he remembered the fight song. He said it in a humorous way. Here he is.
Feels good getting a win, and we got another one next week, so we'll celebrate tonight, should focus tomorrow.
Did you guys remember the words to the fight song?
Oh, yeah, we did. Most definitely we did. We've been itching to sing that.
Now, Nick, you never forgot the words of the fight song, right? Obviously not. You had a lot of success when you were there, right? You remembered it.
I do. I remember it every single day. I need to. I hear the fight song. It's just like riding a bike. Yeah, it comes right back to you.
Right. So now Maryland comes in, and Rutgers is a bad team, obviously. Everybody stomped on them. Maryland is a weird bad team. Like, I read some stat. Maryland's won, like, a couple of games by 40-plus and lost a couple of games by 40-plus, like something that is unheard of, up and down, but mostly down. Should this be a cakewalk for Michigan State on Saturday? Another get-well game, or anything to fear in the Terps?
We should, this is one of those games that on paper you should win. On paper you should dominate. But in the Big Ten, anyone can win at any point in time in any single game. We experienced that versus Illinois. We're up 28-3. Obviously lost that game. And then in 2016, granted we had a bad year overall. We were a 3-9 team, but we went into Maryland, we lost there. So ultimately, you just still got to go out and play the game. And the reason why I'm nervous about this Maryland team, they started off very, very strong, outscoring, really blown out opponents. Then they really, since the last, first 2 to 3 games, they've really gone downhill. But it's still the Big Ten. It's still late in the season. We have a lot riding on this. They have it to win the last game of the season to try to make a stamp going into next year. Josh Jackson, the quarterback at Maryland, I know his brother very, very well. Him and I were childhood friends. Fred Jackson have family, so their athletes are competitive. And it's still not going to be a cakewalk, compared to Rutgers. This game makes me a little bit more nervous than last week.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And from the Michigan State side of things, that Brian Lewerke worked a few things out. A lot of things got better against Rutgers. What are you looking at late in the season? Do you want to see more young guys? Do you just want to see a all-around performance? It doesn't matter. A more Cody White. Does it matter who does it at this time of year? People start looking ahead, like, let's see the young guys more, or do you just want to get a victory and get the heck out of there?
Just want to get a victory and just get out of there. Obviously, you want young guys to play. You want young guys to get experience. But here's where that will come into play. You go out there Saturday, you win on senior day, you get bowl eligible, then the young guys can practice. Young guys can get their practice in bowl practices. And that's the difference maker right there, and that's when the guys get it. You can't, to try to have them in a game situation, most likely they're not going to have sustained drives. They're not going to be on the field for a while. So then, you may not become bowl eligible. Then now you're stuck with just conditioning. There's no practice. So I think what really needs to matter, really needs to count, is that put the best 22 players you can on that field and make sure that when it comes down to it, we just get a victory and give these young guys an opportunity for bowl practices to really develop at that time, develop during that phase, and going to a bowl game, that's when they can get a little bit of playing time as well.
And certainly a person that it matters to a lot would be Mark D'Antonio. Certainly wants his team bowl eligible, get those 15 extra practices. And it's the outcry has sort of died down a little bit. Not that one victory changes anything. Do you have any different sense now, a week or two later, where D'Antonio stands going forward? Do you fully expect him back next year, or would he, of his own volition, want to step away, or do you think he's in for another year or 2 or 3? What do you think?
I still think he's in there for another year, maybe 2 or 3, like you just said. He's a guy who kind of, if he were to go out, will go out on his own merit, will go out on his own way. I listened to the conference that he gave last week. It's all about completing the circle. And I think he's the only one who knows this, and other people who've been really close to him, such as his family, to know exactly what completing your circle means. To him, he has a certain vision, has a certain look going ahead of what that circle would be in completion. He's done everything he wanted to do, I think, with a Rose Bowl championship, winning 4 straight, 3 Big Ten championships, beating all his rivals, putting Michigan State on the map. I just think he wants to continue to do that, continue to dominate the state of Michigan and go back on that run that we did, 4 straight, be more competitive against Ohio State than in the recent years. I just still think he still has a lot in his tank. He has a lot that he wants to accomplish inside and maybe something to prove to himself. But I don't think he's a guy who will want to go out on a struggling season, and I think he can turn it around. Granted, if you look at him when he got there, he turned the program around very early on. He had a couple rough years. 2016 was a 3-9 team. The next year they were 10-2. So he can easily turn it around. It could be a very different ballgame, different atmosphere, and I think he sees that if I've done it once, done it twice, I could do it again.
All right, let's wrap up with the standard prediction. Maryland, Michigan State favored by 22. What say you, Nick?
I still think that Maryland is going to continue to struggle. I think we're going to come out senior day, a lot on the line, be bowl eligible. I think we'll come away with a 28-7 victory.
28-7. All right. Might be sloppy conditions out there, maybe rainy, snowy, whatever. This time of year, that's pretty standard. Appreciate it, Nick, and for everything all season long, all the very interesting insight and everything else. And maybe we'll check back with you for a season wrap-up and a bowl look ahead.
Sounds good to me. Take care. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving. That's Nick Hill, Michigan State, former Big Ten championship running back from 2013. Again, the legal disclaimer. Thank you.
Take care.
And that wraps up our college football coverage for this week and for the regular season. Can you believe it? 12 weeks later, we made it to the finish line. We'll see if Michigan and Michigan State make it to the finish line as well. Don't forget, we got those college football podcasts. You got Matt Charbonnet and Tony Paul's Little Green Room podcast. Talk about green stuff, Michigan State. And they'll preview Michigan State, Maryland. And then you got Angelique's podcast, View from the Podcast, or View from the Press Box. She's never really cleared up which one it was. Also, check us out on social media, the Twitter, the Facebook, Instagram, all that. Don't forget to enter the Pigskin Picks contest, where you can get defeated by me, Wojo, in the picks for the week. And as always, all the time, forevermore, check us out online at DetroitNews.com.